Welcome to Child Abuse Awareness with Darlene J. Clark.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Child Abuse Awareness with Darlene J. Clark. Be a part of the solution instead of part of the problem. If you look at the page, the picture of the little girl in this picture, that's a picture of me. I cropped it and I cropped my twin sister out of the picture. This is how I looked at age 2 when they started selling me, okay? So now y'all can see yourself how I had looked at this percent time. Hey there, Sheila. Thanks for coming. Good to see you. Please hit the like, subscribe, and share. I appreciate it. So I'm going to try to break it down into series, so I'm not going to go beyond possibly my marriage. There's a lot to cover. When I moved in with the mother-in-law, and of course with my husband and my brother-in-law, I was 18 and a senior in high school. Many remember why I did this, but if you don't, please get my last book. When I was pregnant, it was tough being around someone who kept trying to break us up. I got pregnant after I quit school, okay? So the reason why I got married was not because of pregnancy. It was to save my life, okay? It was hard living with somebody that kept trying to break us up. They had a mental disorder saying, well, he's my husband, you need to leave him alone, when it was in fact her son. I would try to dress up in church for church. I had skirts and slips. And of course, the slips are shorter than the dresses. So she said they were too sexy when there wasn't nothing sexy about it, okay? It's just a regular skirt. I mean, a slip that goes under a dress. She would cut the white, the straps. Anytime I had a one-piece bathing suit, she cut the straps. She didn't want me to cook. She didn't want me to clean. She did not want me to do my own laundry. And a lot of times when she did my laundry, I ended up not having a lot of my things because she said it was too sexy when it wasn't sexy. Okay. So I said, well, me being pregnant, I need to be closer to my husband's work since he worked 30 minutes away. So what if I go into labor and he's caught in traffic, yada, yada, yada. My uh, mother-in-law did not have a license. Yeah, this is the mother-in-law, yes. She would actually say that she was my husband's, that he was her husband. And then, so we moved into an apartment in Huntsville. But with the landlord saying we could only live there until we had the baby. And then when we had the baby, we had to move out from that apartment. Well, we went ahead and said, yeah, it'd be good to go back over there, even though, because I would need somebody's help. It's going to be my first child in which I was able to keep, y'all know that. But after all during while I lived there was a lot of crazy stuff that went on. Um, he made a statement about the neighbor usually looks beautiful, but she is ugly when she wakes up. I said, how did you know that she's ugly when she wakes up? I'm not going to tell you that. So evidently, that shows that he was cheating on me, okay? He would be gone, his truck would be there, and he'd be gone for an hour. I never knew which apartment he was, who he was with, but he told me it's none of my business, none of my concern. He sided with my stepmom on my registered letters of my dad's inheritance. The case of my dad dying that accidental death when he fell 180 feet, the case had come to fruition. My stepmom usually worked, and I was shocked at both times. She knocked on the door and she said, I told the mail lady that I was you. I signed your name on the registered letter. I said that she opened the registered letters. She tore off the front page of the letters. She refused to let me even look at my letters. So when my husband came in, I said, please help me get this away from her or go call the police. This is illegal. This is part of the inheritance. It's going to help us because insurance did not pay for my health. I was going to have to pay for the birth of my child and all straight out of our pockets. Okay. Thank you so much, Sheila. And I said, please, Sue, please, Mom, please give it to me. Oh, you were having a lot of trouble when you're holding your baby, having your baby. You might lose it dealing with this. I said, Mom, I know legal. That is illegal. You telling the mail carrier that you're me, for one. You signing my name on both of them two letters at two different times in the same year. You opened them. You tore out the first page of what I supposed to did something, turned that in, so I never got to see what I was supposed to turn in. And my husband told me to drop it. He would not side with me on getting me help, on making sure she gave me that information. So all this was basically illegal. He kept lurking around men and a handicapped neighbor. The handicapped neighbor, I was brushing my hair at the time. I think I was 7 months pregnant. I just got out of the shower, got dressed, and I said, well, he's outside. I'm just going to go out there, bring a kitchen chair out there, brush my hair, let the heat dry it some. That's what we do when we're from the country originally. We don't want to use blow dryers. We want it to just be natural. So I was brushing my hair now, and my husband Jeffrey is my husband at the time, now ex, and the neighbor guy were walking back and forth from one end of the porch back to the other side, back and forth. I kept telling them hello. Well, he wouldn't say hello to me. Neither of them would. So I was like, what gives? And so the next time they passed by, I touched the boy with the man with my hairbrush, and his response was to turn and kick my pregnant belly like it was a football. I go, ow, and then I fell to the concrete porch. My husband said, well, you shouldn't have touched him with your hairbrush. I said, Tony, I can't walk. I need help. And I had to use my arms and I drug myself back into the house, to the couch, pull myself up. No medical attention whatsoever. Did not care for our baby whatsoever. He just cared about whatever that satisfactory with that dude was. There were times when my stepsister, May, would come, and I'm sorry to say that one time she convinced me. She said the doctor told her that if she has another baby, that she'll die. My stepmom called me, and I believed the lie. So I gave her part of the money to go have an abortion because I thought it was a life or death situation. I think it was a facade. I think it was a lie because guess what? She got pregnant again and had another child. So, needless to say, uh, and here I was pregnant, having a lot of complications, being hurt from being kicked in the belly. Um, the other things that were going on in that home, it was atrocious. Um, just the lack of respect. My stepbrother, that's very violent, he kept coming up. Anytime he showed up, he banged on the door like it was like he was trying to knock the door down. It was that bad. And I would go ahead nervously and open the door because he usually had to go to the bathroom, and then he would leave. But it still was unnerving. But anyway, when let's see, when May come up to, she asked my husband to watch her child, which was he was 6 months old, and he had diarrhea. I said, well, I will not be able to take care of him because I'm having a lot of complications right now. The doctor told me I needed bed rest. Okay. He said, I'll watch him. Don't you worry about it. I'll watch him. I said, but you got to work tomorrow. No sooner than she left, and of course, the child was with us. He said, well, I got to work tomorrow. I got to go to bed. So guess who was up all night? But it's like he kept kissing their butt, okay? He kept doing whatever they wanted, and it was causing me worse health problems. They didn't give a rat's butt about, me. They just cared. So I wondered what it was that at times I wondered whether he had slept with her himself. So it was kind of weird, a lot of the things that kept going on. So we have went over a lot of the some of the sex abuse that happened, but we're not going to go into all of that. But Sam Saber, he was the one that wrestled me and put his head on my chest when I lay on the floor. He had pinned me down. But the good thing about him was he had unlocked the memory of when I was 2 years old. It's been the first time that they sold me. That and when I can remember in therapy, trigger warning. I can remember in therapy, I was sitting there as I was replaying it, said, "Oh, Daddy and his army buddy was sitting at the kitchen table, and it was a metal table, and it had rungs all the way around it." How many of y'all remember them metal rung tables back in the 60s? And they opened up their beer bottles on the side of the table. And me as an adult, I could describe the scene more so than I probably could as a little kid. I was saying that the beer bottle of his army buddy had a chip on it. And mom put my naked body on the kitchen table. So I was already groomed by this age that you see in this picture right here. I was always already groomed to not move. And that table was cold, a metal table, your bare skin touching all over your body, okay? But I already knew not to cry. I already knew no matter how bad it hurt, no matter how cold it was, don't you wits up. You just do what they say, regardless of how you felt, because you don't matter. They matter, but you as a kid do not matter. So you grow to understand that, especially when there's neglect and an abandonment, even basically since birth. And but it's sickening to know that then after mom put my body up there and she went to the head of the table near where my arms and my head would be. Okay, she held my hands up where, a kid a lot of times they at that age they like putting their hands down more so. They like working with their hands a lot. But so she held my hands. She told me to lie still. Dad stood behind his army body while he used the beer bottle on me. sexually. I don't need to be more graphic than that. The next thing I remember, I don't remember the pain. I zoned out. I don't remember being cut, which I did because a beer bottle had been, like I said, it was a broken part right there. Friends of mine, when I told them about this, they said there have been kids that have died from the suction that when you put a bottle insert in a tube, that a lot of times it sucks one of the organs in and kills them. So that's another way in which God brought me through it. The next thing I remember is how many of y'all have seen um, that sex trafficking film that was out at the studios? I can't remember what the name of that guy's, maybe it. I went to it, and one of the first things that hit me was when you seen all these kids in line and you seen them taking photos. I was like, oh crap. I remember. Then the next thing that it reminded me of was after, y'all remember that little girl, after she was messed with, they had put her in a bathtub. Okay, so that's like, oh geez, that's what they did with me multiple times. They put me in a bathtub. Here I was, 2 year old. The water was all the way up to my breast, my nipples, okay? At 2 years old, I can remember being scared. I was afraid to move. The ripples of the water, it felt like I was going to topple over. Maybe they wanted me to drown. I don't know, but I guess it didn't make them, didn't, they didn't care. I remember the water being bloody, and I remember being so afraid to move because I almost lost my balance and I knew that I would drown. At 2 years old, I already knew that. Kind of weird, huh? And remember, at 2 years old is also when my sister Sabina had said that dad had messed with her. And see, she wasn't one of my dad's kids either. And my mom ended up going ahead after she beat my sister Angelic, is what I call her. Uh, and he ended up putting her, uh, she ended up putting him in jail, coming back and shooting at us. But needless to say, I told y'all about mom selling her and to a police officer, and she ended up aging out in an orphanage. Anyway, when I go back and I thought about all the scarring, especially what the OBGYN had said that I, he had never seen anyone as messed up internally as me. I didn't know how to act. I'm sorry, I did not know. Here I was in the hospital. And first, before we go into this, just I went to his office and I said, I'm bleeding every time I bend down, every time I try to sweep the floor, every time I try to pick up a piece of like a towel on the floor or anything, I start bleeding. And he said, well, you need surgery after he checked me. But he didn't tell me what the problem was. So I thought, I'm going to get me a second opinion because he's not really telling me what's wrong with me. So I went and got the second opinion, and he's the one that told me that my uterus was doubled in size. So I go back to him and said, my uterus is doubled in size. He said, I could have told you that. And I looked at him like, well, why didn't you? Why didn't you tell me? I mean, I probably would have never got the second opinion had you told me what was actually the problem. But you know how scary it is. And a lot of y'all know also that at age 4, Dad did genital mutilation on me with a knife. I'm sorry if this triggers anyone, it makes you sick or whatever, but I've got to be real. The sick twisted father who told me at age 14 that he sorry that my stepmom got him to do everything, but the stepmom was not in the picture at the time. It was him. He did this to me. He used a knife. I remember him parting my legs. I remember him using the knife and cutting me. I remember him closing my legs back. And then I remember him putting it in his mouth and him actually eating it, y'all. I kid you not. So the next time I want to go is then I remembered the more I uncovered, I remember when we moved to Florida and mom would take me to stores, restaurants. I thought, good, it's going to be mommy daughter day. It wasn't mommy daughter day. And it was, instead, it's like, you want to buy my daughter? Here she is dressed in a white dress, just like you seen in them. I've seen pictures kind of like that had these little crochet loops and then the little blue flowers on it, but theirs was pink and had ribbon. Instead, mine was blue. So when I saw that picture and then I made the picture bigger, you saw the little, look like little crocheted parts in there. I'm just thankful that one of the guys actually took me to his house just to play with his daughter. But the rest of them, mom said, you can do anything you want to with her, just bring her back alive. Okay? Of course, when they had me in a child pornos, there were different names they called me. Okay? And so sometimes I wonder what all they did when my dad took me over there to the military base. I thought really that he was still in the military at this time. But when I went through ancestry, I found out that the same year I was born, he was let out of the military. It was honorably discharged. And yet, they knew he had a history of essaying girls. Hello there. Good to see you, David. Thank you. They knew he had a history of sexually abusing girls, assaulting, raping. They even warned her not to get with him. That was a too happy. I screwed up. Yeah, I can imagine. And people think it's easy. People think that we want attention. Yeah, in a way, we do want attention. We want to bring attention to this thing happening, okay? We're not doing this to glorify. We all wish we had a happy life, okay? We wish we had a happy childhood. We wish we had parents that treated us like we mattered, okay? We wish we were not abused or neglected. We wish that they didn't go ahead and try to make money out of selling us, okay? We wish these things didn't happen. But unfortunately, in reality, it did. And nothing, no one can say, can change the truth of that. Especially, hearing that state trooper acknowledging that I was in the majority of his dad's child pornos. And he said, oh, it excites me just thinking about doing you when you were a little girl. And I was like, do what? And remember the other day I went ahead and I shared his picture. I'm going to go ahead and give him the glory again, even though he's deceased now. I'm still going to go ahead and share his little photo there. There he is. He was an Alabama state trooper. His name was Johnny Greenhall. There he is right there in all his glory. Of course, like I said, he said that after his dad died, he had a friend who enjoyed watching the child pornos with his dad. So he ended up giving him half of the child pornos. And I had asked him, I said, and I wish I could have got up from that table, but my legs would not work, okay? Have y'all ever been to where y'all have been in a situation where you've been knocked off your feet and you just had to stay there until your limbs will work again? Well, that's what happened to me. I had to just sit there and take it. So I said, okay, how old was I in the child pornos? He said, ages 4 to age 11. Well, I said, you know what? That fits in perfectly because um, that's when my stepmom got into the picture and my mom had left. And that's when, at age 11, I had to go back with my mom again. So I said, okay, that does fit in right there. And you know how scary that is? Knowing and hearing and being disgusted about that pedophile right there. Knowing. And then you go back and you think, okay, when I was pregnant with my second son with marriage, and I had my two nephews and my son with me, and I was shopping in a department store. And for that old man to grab my arm and say, you're coming with me, oh man, that's scary. That's frightening. When I go back and think about it, it had to be him. It had to be his daddy. But I said, okay, let go of my arm and I'll go with you. Just let go. He let go. And instead of turning around to go with him, I took off like a bat out of heck because you know what? It wasn't just about me at this time, right? It was about that baby I was carrying. It's about these three other kids I had in this buggy. I had to keep all of us safe at that moment and make sure that they was going to get delivered back to their mothers, even though, I was the mother of one of them and then the mother of the one to be. And it's pretty scary that when I told my husband about all this, he just beat me and called me a whore. It's pretty sickening and twisted. I knew I couldn't call the police because guess what? They were a part of it too. So when you kept delving down and finding out more, and then there's the agoraphobia that steps in. Does anybody in here know what agoraphobia is? You're afraid to step out of the house for fear of being attacked, basically. I became afraid to step outside, not just nervous, terrified. The agoraphobia took hold and it was strong. I felt like I was being watched, like I was being followed, like someone was going to grab me again. And for a moment, I questioned myself. I wondered if I was losing my mind, but I wasn't. This wasn't schizophrenia. This wasn't imagination. This was something deeper. The memories were beginning to surface, and with these memories came danger. Because the more truth that began to come out, the more it felt like something or someone wanting it to stay buried. The more I remembered, the more unsafe I felt. And that's when I began to understand that moment in the store. That wasn't random. That wasn't just something that happened. It's part of something bigger, something hidden, something that was now beginning to unravel. Pandora's box had opened, and it wasn't closing. But even in all of it, I was still here, still breathing, still fighting to survive. And the truth was only just beginning to rise. But even then, I didn't see a way out as the dark memories they swirled inside me. I sank deeper into a depression I couldn't name, no matter how much despair I felt. Even though I was a Christian, and those around me in the church never offered comfort. They stared, but no one came close. And the police, no matter how times I hoped, never helped either. I knew that even in all this despair, I was utterly alone. And that's when, despite all the weight pressing down, I realized I needed therapy. No escape from that truth, just like the therapist had said. And so when I ended up having to see that therapist, and the elder at church ended up hiring him. So he was basically getting paid to do some cruel things to me, to wrestle me, to pin me down, to put his head on my breast, to lock me in the rooms and not let me out, to hide the key where I could not get out. A lot of different things. Like he had semen on his pants and I was forced to sit there. He would not open the door. But like I said, I was wanting to scream. And the last time I had enough. I had enough when he pinned me down to the when he touched my breast, when he tried to do hypnosis. I would not go completely under his spell. I would not go under the hypnotic state. And so things got worse, as you can imagine. And the more I thought about it, the more I remembered that, oh no, when Daddy had took me to the arsenal, like I said, I thought he was still in there, but he wasn't. There goes that little white dress with the blue flowers on it, going up the little bitty stairs that leads up. All that metal up there, all the scaffolding and all these men sitting around in a circle, and I had to get in the middle of all the grown men and finding out that he was no longer in the military. Coming to that realization stunk. Coming to that realization that our own military was in on this. Coming to the realization and hearing threats about my safety. But I'm not going to say it all in here, which I had divulged probably before. But today I'm not going there. And then to find out that that it just grows and grows and grows, right? And to know, I don't even know how old I was over there at this place in Marietta. I don't know how old I was, but I can remember. Let me get to this that when I remembered, I was delivered there by my dad, wearing a white dress with small little bitty flowers, blue flowers. Wow. So tired of white dresses with blue flowers. Don't get me one today, please. So it was so scary. Dad had done went ahead and drove off. There was some horse stables right here to my right. To my left was a little boy running with all his might. He had blood on his chest. So he run past me. He had a look on his face. I thought at first it was possibly a smile. I didn't know. But he collapsed on that fence, the stables. He didn't make it. He did not make it. They ended up tearing down the fence. I guess because you go like that, you got to dispose of any of his bodily fluids down there, right? Can't have proof, right? And the very first time that I remember actually being inside that place, it was very dark. Seeing the man stand beside me, having a shotgun at his side, and talking to me. I can't remember exactly everything that was said, but I remember the fear that he instilled. I stood there like I was a robot. I was afraid to act like a normal 4-year old, okay? I knew I had to stay perfectly still right there beside him and do what I was ordered. Too bad I cannot remember people's faces, and too bad that throughout my adulthood I ran into a couple of these culprits, and I was in one of their traps yet again as an adult a couple times. You would not believe the devastation when I ended up seeing that psychiatrist who started believing me. And I asked him, why did he believe me? He said, because you answer right away and it fits in. He said, no matter how hard it is to believe, it still fits in. And I told him, thank you. And so when he started believing me, that's when more things opened up. That's when I started having the flashback of the fire that my stepmom did. That's when I had the flashback of her son holding me down. I mean, raping me while she held me down. And I got pregnant. And them doing what they did to me with the baby. Never got medical attention. Never had a birth certificate. There's no proof he ever existed. The only proof I ever had, and I tried to go back to the health department, I tried to go back to the police department because, like I said, we didn't have insurance at the time, so I was going to the health department. And the first time they examined me, they said, you had a baby before. What did you do with it? I said, do what? I think I would remember if I had a baby before. Seriously, I thought I would. I thought they were crazy. But in all reality, I had it blocked out. She had even called the police. That's why I said I went to the police department wanting to get records too. But because I never got the actual police report and a report number, then they refused to look it up and see if there's a case that still exists. And I kind of blame my stepmom with that, with her being in the legal field and secretary and working in that town and all that kind of thing. I kind of think she had ties in them continuing to cover it up. Because I had went there years later, and I said, well, I'm going to get the proof. Well, they still got it. They told me that the files were still in the basement and they weren't going to throw it away. They was going to type everybody's files that's in the basement up on the computer. Funny how my records kept disappearing, right? Funny how I went to different doctors and all the records are gone. Funny how they said you had never been here. Kind of weird, huh? Funny how no matter what, where I had the proof behind, uh, what is that called? Ear, nose, and throat doctor, that he went ahead and said, I'm going to have them do a full body scan, MRI, CAT scan, whatever, on your body. I said, okay. Then I go to find out that my nose had been twisted and blocked on one side since I was 6 years old, he said. He said, what happened to you? I said, well, I fell out of bunk bed when I was 7. He said, no, this was done intentionally to you. And I really did not remember what had happened, but then I started seeing the memory of my daddy coming out towards me with a pair of pliers. And then he said, yes, the plier grooves were embedded in my cartilage. So it had been blocked, and they were worried with it being blocked up since I was age 6 all the way to 2001. So that was 1968 to 2001. It had been blocked. It had polyps. They were afraid that it was going to be cancer, and I praise God that it wasn't, that it drained out. He also told me that the majority of my bones in my body have been broken or fractured. He said it's hard to find a spot on my body that hasn't been cracked. I thought, whoa, you know what I'm saying? Wow. And of course, y'all know what the OBGYN saying that they had never seen a lady that internally messed up. And when him saying I'm going to need therapy, I didn't believe it. I thought I was doing dang good considered. Okay, I had a job at McDonald's. I had my two kids. I had uh, babysitting people coming over, playing with my kids a lot. I had birthday parties. I worked in a garden. I canned the vegetables. I did so much, and it's like, really, um, I'm going to need therapy. But the weird thing is, when he said, "Were you abused?" I really thought the regular abuse, right? But when he started saying that he worked 4 hours on me and as if none had been removed, but he did say he had to call the kidney specialist because when he went to do the hysterectomy, he accidentally cut my ureter. So the kidney surgeon stepped in briefly to repair that. But he noticed two very important things. He noticed that both my kidneys were about to shut down. He said that my tubes, both of my tubes on my kidneys, were tied in a knot. He said that with one being tied, it's a 1 in 999,999 chance for one to be tied. He said, but for both of them to be tied, okay, it's good to see you. Thanks for coming. Lots of love. We'll talk later. And he said, for both of them to be tied, it's double that amount, like 1 in close to 2 million chance. So we could not figure out how my tubes for my kidneys. But I do recall my dad saying you weren't going to live to be my age, so he knew about this evidently, right? But guess he didn't expect the doctors to catch his glitch. Had it not been for that doctor accidentally cutting my ureter, I probably would not be here today. So I thanked him for doing that. He said, but I actually did that. So I'm going to pay for the surgery because it was my medical mistake that I had done. I said, but it saved my life if it wouldn't have been done. We wouldn't have known what about this other problem. They told me you got the possibility of it going back that way since. And let's just pray for me, please. But anyway, when we go into things took a turn where my husband was being allowed to beat me. Then his siblings beat me. They were allowed. The police allowed it. The people at church said it's best to let him kill me. It's my only way to go to heaven. Uh, I would go to church and they would call me when I got home from church. We let you go to church, but you're not supposed to talk to nobody. You're not supposed to. We just allow you to go to church. So soon enough, I stopped going to church. But see, he was a violent one. They should have sat him down and told him that it's wrong to abuse your wife. They should have told him all this, right? But no, I was the evil one. Because guess what? You know why I was the evil one? If you ain't figured out, because I held on to the secrets of a lot of them. That's why. Because I knew that they were the evil ones. I knew that someone was there when my stepmom had the cult meetings in her yard. I knew that. I knew. But you know, that one time, it's really scary when they had my persona back like I thought I was 2 years old. Everybody had these like my helmets. It did not look like regular goats' heads. Okay, it looked even more sadistic. These masks that they were wearing. They were in that pentagram that was drawn on the bottom of the tent. And they had these candles, and it was black and red, and it's purple a little bit. And they were all had their hands raised and their palms up while they were praising their God. Not our God, not the one that made the heavens and the earth, but their God, basically Satan, right? I saw that knife. I'm not one to defend myself. I I would have seen them just to do this, but evidently God had other plans. Something got me to grab that knife, and I stabbed Master C in the thigh with it. I don't have the. I couldn't even stab my ex-husband to defend myself, so I'm not that violent. But we soon figured out why that happened, right? I went running. Well, went to the thing and I opened the curtain. Oh, it's daylight. Well, look to the left. All of these kids in rabbit cages and other cages that was in part of a horse fencing that never my stepmom never closed off and put a gate up and never put her horse in it when she had a horse. All these kids, I was shocked. But when I moved that door thing, I not only was the 2-year-old that I was seeing myself as, here all of a sudden I'm 15-year-old. I am freaking 15-year-old. I grew quickly right there. uh, it changed me really quick back to myself. And so I listened to the voice that guided me. Go to the cages, let the kids out one by one. Tell them do not go around the house this percent way because they'll get caught if they go this way. But have them to go around the long way, the opposite side of the house. Somebody's waiting on them to help them. I didn't know if it was for true, but I heard that voice and I told them. One girl stopped, said, "Sister, go with me, please. You can't stay here with them." I said, "I'm sorry. I live here. I've got to stay here. I'm sorry. I can't go. Please go and be safe." Years later, I ran into one of the guys who actually pulled me out from underneath the house. I was in a wooden box, a wooden coffin. They had beat me so bad. He said, yes, it was him that and a friend that pulled me out from underneath there. But they unalived his friend that was blonde, had blonde hair. They unalived him. I said, well, what happened next? Because I really cannot remember. I really don't. But I do remember that, seeing them do this. I do remember the fact that I couldn't stand up. I couldn't try to get myself out of there. This guy had to pick me up. He took me to his car to try to get me to safety. 3 days later, he said the cops showed up. He said by this time he had me where I could finally start walking again. He said it took a while to be able, he said my whole body was still bruised tremendously. How bad they did this. When the police showed up, he said, please take her to get medical attention. Please don't take her back to over there. They might kill her. Please, I'm begging you. The cop said, well, she's got custody of her. He said, but look at the bruises. Look, you don't need to take her back over there. He was the one telling me this years later, okay? And I ran into him online. said, please, but they didn't listen, and they took me back over there. So then on top of that, I ran into that little girl that said, sis, come with me. She happened to be here in Tennessee. I was living in Alabama at the time. And she was at a, I think it was really a cult. I think she thought she was in safety and she really wasn't in safety because the guy kept trying to talk me into coming there. And I believe that he was a good guy at first. And she goes, well, I would like to read your book, sister, and see how much it coincides because I got a feeling that a lot of our stories intermingle, right? I said, okay. Next thing I know, they're making a movie, a supposedly her story, using my transcript on my life. So next time I hear, I said, well, how did you fare when you got home? How were you treated? Well, I was okay, but because I ran, they killed my twin sister. I said, do what? You were a twin too? So how many of these other people that was out here in cages were they had a twin? How many? How many are getting away with it because there's multiple births? Well, they might not know of another one, that another sibling or so. How many? So it made you think. So then a little while had passed and she said, hey, sis, do me a favor. I said, what's that? She said, I wouldn't like you to come be on my movie, but we went to the church, the sanctuary, and your book burnt. I can no longer do my movie because your book burnt. I said, you can still do your movie. Go by what you know of your life. You don't need my story to do your movie. Otherwise, what you're doing is stealing my movie. And God knew that you were trying to steal my story. God knew that. And guess what? He stopped it. He's like, this is her story. This ain't your story. You don't need to have her story and say it's your story. It don't fly that way. So I want to get into some of the funnier things. I ended up going into several times I did go into abuse women's shelters and such. And I began my writing journey after joining a support group for dissociative identity disorder. It was in that group that I first shared a small piece of what I call Regina's Triumph. At first, I didn't believe it would matter, just a few scattered thoughts on paper, but soon others in the group asked for copies, saying my words gave them a way to explain their own dissociation. I kept writing, thinking maybe, just maybe, I wasn't as worthless as I had been told. But even then, therapy wasn't enough. My first therapist, Sam Saber, did help me uncover some buried memories, but it was still riddled with harm. Then when I started with this other doctor that believed me, wow, that was a turning point. For the first time, I felt truly believed. But no matter how good a therapist was, no matter how much progress I made, it didn't make the journey easy. Uncovering these chains, these brick walls inside me, each step was hard. I learned I couldn't face it all at once. I had to take one piece at a time, one moment, so that I could survive. And so I kept writing step by step. And I want you to remember in Matthew 18, verse 6, it says, but if anyone causes one of these little ones who believe in me to stumble, it'd be better for them to have a large millstone fastened around their neck and be drowned in the depths of the sea. Can y'all hold on a second? I need to turn my stove off. I'm going to put some kind of music on while I go. Uh, while I go on there for a second. Thank you, everyone. Sorry about that. But as we progress on, and then we think about it, and then I wondered little steps. I wonder these little trivial things. Hello, Claude. Good to see you. I wondered, like, how much did my teachers know? I wondered why, when I went to school, did the principal call me into the office for an hour each day for about a week? And then the final day, he went ahead and hit his desk really hard. That scared me. That almost scared me into telling. Seriously, I almost told. I mean, when somebody hit something like that, then I was sort of like, "Oh man, you're just about ready to spill the beans." But still, the fear was still there. The fear of the retaliation from the police that had threatened me years before. And then it's kind of funny how, when like around 2001, I called that principal up. He was no longer a principal. I said, "I got a question." I said, "Why did you call me to the office back such and such?" He said, "Because we knew you were being abused." I said, "Y'all do what?" Say what? Y'all knew I was being abused? He said, "Yeah." I said, "But why couldn't anything be done?" He said, "Because you didn't speak." I said, "You know what? That is a lame excuse." And I said, "They really need to change the laws. If they're waiting for kids to speak when they're taught that it's not safe to speak." Who agrees with me on that? When you get too fearful and you know that it's not safe to talk, a lot of times when you do talk, they send you back to these abusive parents, right? And I said, that would have put me in more danger had I said anything. He said, "No, we already had you a place to go to." And I was thinking, man, if I had known that they had me a safe place, man, I would have told, I would have got out of there, I would have been safe. That's where the problem is, everyone. A kid that's been tortured and their voice never mattering to no one. The silence, the shackles needed broken, the truth needed exposed. So when you go and think about it, oh yeah, there was preachers and elders and senators that was there in the cult meetings. Okay, there were policemen. There was all these people that's supposed to serve and protect that was killing our children. Okay, they were there, made a contract basically, so to speak. When you go like this, I'm going to serve and protect the public. Who are they really serving and protecting a lot of times? Their fellow men, the fellow police officers, the senators, the governors, the criminals. That's who they're protecting. And that's sad. But I want to tell y'all, there are some good cops out there. They're few and far between in what I believe, but there might actually, maybe things are making a headway now. And I think all of us that's been through something like that, I hope police officers will come to us and want us to guide them and they get all the information that we know, right? Where they can stop turning a blind eye. Hey, well, look at that person. This person was such and such, This person, one time my sister, a lot of things I could not believe that my sister said. But she said, we went over there to see you one time, her and Gwen. You weren't there. Did you know that May had told us that you had a baby? And this was just recently that my twin told me about this, right? She said, but you know what? You're going to have to face God for you having that baby and being promiscuous. Do what, sis? Excuse me? Promiscuous? I was raped. There was nothing about promiscuity there. I was held down. Excuse me. So she goes, oh, yeah, I forgot that. I said, well, thank you so much for judging me and telling me that I got to face the repercussions of what happened to my baby. Don't you think that that tears into my heart and soul even today? I believe he's with God. But to tell y'all the truth, when she did the fire and everything, right? And when I told the doctor, the psychiatrist about it, and I described the tires in around it, he said she knew how to dispose of a body because the fire was hot enough because she had burned it for days, and then she said tires would hide the human remains, and I thought, dang, right? But then again, I got a fault. I'm sorry, y'all. I've got a big fault. A lot of times throughout a lot of this abuse and stuff, I zone out blood. I don't remember seeing blood, around me on the clothing. I don't remember blood from a knife. I don't remember. I zone it out. So when I had first told that psychiatrist about seeing the knife come down, and then telling them that I don't know if it came all the way down, but I'm assuming because I seen her going out that door with a blue baby blanket to the fire, throwing it on the fire. She said, but you know what she could have done? I said, what's that? He said, what if she replaced your baby with a doll? What if she in turn really sold your baby? And I said, do what? I said, I really think he died because, that. And I said, so then I remembered something a couple of months ago also. My stepmom came up to me and she showed me two diamond rings. And she gloated. She said, look what I got for what I did to your son. Look what I got, these two big diamonds. Look. So, and y'all know about the diamond stories, okay? So, yes, I believe he is not with us. Lord have mercy if he'd lived through all that. And also, when she said that I wasn't there, that she and my sister Gwen was taken over there to a house where they had me and passing me around like a two bit, you know what? There were ladies and men both are raping me, she said. Here I was, 14, 15-year old. She said, that ain't the first time we had to go there and save you. And I'm like, do what? I got big blockages, people. They have a habit of doing things which makes you forget. They got all kind of different things, and they try to rule it in. Uh, Thanks to Kathy O'Brien's book, Transformation, I read some in there about the place where I was born. They were really big on experimentation where I was born. They were really big on the MK Ultra. They were really big on splitting people's minds into a lot of different alters. They would kept shooting you up and dividing the mind more and more and more. So some of these things might not just be caused by trauma, but from the drugs in which they instilled to the people. I'd say that I got tired of being abused. I got tired of the preacher and them saying it's best to let my husband kill me. I got tired of waiting around for him to kill me. I went ahead and I left and I went far away. I went all the way to upstate New York. It was someone that was in that support group as well. So they took it upon themselves to come and get me. And I said, yeah, that's far away. So that's good. If it's not for that person, I don't think I'd be around today. And so I got a couple funny stories while I was there. Then some ladies came up from a church and visited and wanted to preach a little bit. So, well, I didn't need to be living there. Um, Please come and live with me. We'll find you a good place. So I went ahead and I thought, well, I might that might be fun because she's got a little boy, and it'd be kind help me not miss my son as bad. So sure, and I might could help out. But that was and this was in Rome, New York. First, I was in Clinton, New York, and I lived above Chinese restaurant. One part was a Chinese restaurant I lived above, and a shoe store. So the next place I went was Rome, New York. But she got on to me and she said, well, you cannot be friends with my friends. So don't even talk to my friends. And I was thinking, well, how am I going to make friends if I'm with you, right? If I'm living in your home and only go where you take me, how am I going to make friends? So one day when she was gone, I went ahead and said, well, I'm going to go to Utica. And I try to get back and get over there to that place and let them try to help me find a place to live. Okay, it was kind of amazing. Gonna have y'all laughing for a minute. And so, going to Utica, the bus said the next stop, Attica, Attica Prison. I'm like, okay, here we go, Attica Prison. Then all of a sudden, before we ever got to the prison, he said next stop. So all of a sudden, he was looking at me, and I guess he kind of knew what I was going to do. So, just portraying a little bit of fun from the old history, I started hitting the back of the seats. Attica, Attica, Attica. And so then the bus driver was going, Attica, Attica. Everybody on the bus was going, Attica, Attica, Attica. He said, okay, now we're getting close to the prison, y'all, so we don't need to do that no more. But thanks, that was fun while it lasted, but we don't need another rising at Attica prison. I thought that was hilarious. So then I go ahead and we pick them people up, and then we're headed to Utica. Well, I didn't know this section of town and how to get around to where I was going. And this was New York, and I'm used to Alabama, okay? This is a big shell shock. Having to basically depend on, Lord, please show me who I could trust and who I shouldn't trust. Please protect me on whatever decision I make. So the only guy I saw, he was either a Crip, so he was a gang member. He was wearing, which one's wearing a blue bandana over the head? So I said, can you tell me how to get to such and such? He said, just follow me. So we went all around town, all through these alleys and everything, and he took me to where I was supposed to go. But that place where I was originally going to go, they were closed that day. So I went to the non drinking bar beside it. And the guy says, well, we're fixing to close up. I said, okay, thinking, what am I going to do now, right? Because that place is closed. Okay, he said, well, that gang member's out there and we don't want you to go with him. You're going to be in a world of trouble. It's like, probably so. Yeah, you're probably right on here. We'll call you a cab and we'll get them to take you to the abused women's shelter. I said, but that's going to be a problem there. Usually you have to go to the hospital first and then the hospital contacts the abused women's shelter because then because then I'm not going to be able to stay at the abused women's shelter. He said, yeah, we could convince them, you go on there and everything. So the cab driver took me and dropped me off at the abused women's shelter. Lady goes, I don't know you. I'm going to have to be up all night because you might be a murderer. Oh man, I got to worry now that you're going to murder all these ladies in here. She goes, first thing in the morning, I want you to leave. I just bundled up the little bit I had right there. I said, God, please guide me. And I start to walk out the door. She goes, no, 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 you're free to stay the night. No, no, no. But you're out first thing in the morning. I said, I don't want you to miss your precious sleep. And I don't want you to be worried all night long that I'm going to be murdering all these ladies in here. Okay? And so I went ahead and walked out. I said, okay, God, please guide me. I said, I don't know where I'm at. I don't really know, so please guide me in the direction. I kept walking, and to my left were two firemen that was washing the fire truck. Out of anywhere else where I could have been, I happened to come upon two fire workers. I told them what had happened. They said, of course, you're not supposed to be delivered there. You're supposed to go to the hospital and then be evaluated before you go there. I said, that's what I told them. I said, now I don't have a chance of that being a place I could go to after the hospital. Okay? So he said, we're going to call a cab and have them to drop you off at the hospital so you could be evaluated for even housing. I said, okay. So going there, I mean, this hospital is totally different than other hospitals in Alabama. This is, I kid you not, this was a horrific, nightmarish thing. So it happened to be the same cab driver that dropped me off at the place earlier, come back and got me and took me to the hospital. He said, I could have told him that. And I was like, I wish you had. So anyway, I got to the hospital. First thing they do, they had a room that had like about 8 to 10 beds, but they had metal and then they had curtains in between each thing. They took all of our clothes but our panties, okay? So I was laying there, no sheets, no blankets, nothing. You see the glass windows, everybody that goes by, walking by, they're able to see my boobs, they're able to see my nakedness. I'm sorry, but I don't like that. I'm from the country. I got pride in myself. I don't want everybody leering at me, right? So that wasn't the brunt of that. And then she said, well, we're going to be right here. We're going to be in the doorway. We're going to watch you. I think it's going to be all right. But I kept seeing her get up. All of a sudden, one of the girls, oh man, I could not see her, but I heard her. I'm going to come over there and I'm going to kill all of y'all. I'm going to kill you all. Man, hearing that after everything I just been through, trying to escape, my husband trying to kill me, trying to escape this other stuff, and now there's somebody in the hospital and behind one of these curtains is threatening to kill us all. I jumped down. I jumped out of the bed and I stood beside my bed. She came back in there and said, Miss Thomas, Miss Clark, go ahead. Go ahead. Lay back down. You're safe. I said, how do I know I'm safe? I can't see her. I can't see whether she's chained or tied or handcuffed or whatever. She goes, you ain't got to worry about her. She's just sounds gruff because she used a knife to try to cut out her vocal cords. That's why she sounded so gruff. I'm like, that don't mean she ain't gonna come over here and try to do something to us. No, she ain't gonna do nothing to you. I said, well, how do I know if somebody wants talking about doing it? I want to make sure that because some people are still trying to do it. So there was about 4 or 5 times I jumped out of my bed and just got stood beside it, but I kept getting reprimanded. They said, okay. They said, well, you're not acting normal. So we're going to put you upstairs in the psych unit to evaluate you a couple of weeks. Just because you're doing a behavior that's not normal. And I thought, not normal? Excuse me? I'm in a different state than, I'm from Alabama. I'm used to when they do evaluations, you just got double rooms, okay? You're not in there with about 10 people behind and curtains drawn and you can't see everybody, right? They don't even take your clothes, man. Here they took all your clothes, your socks, your shoes, your brassiere, your shirt, your pants. And I had to lay there like that without even a pillow or a blanket. And it was freezing it was freezing up there like probably around March and April or May, something like that. But it was still cold in upstate New York. So I had to wait till finally, and some guys, they let the guys be with the girls. And I thought, that's kind of weird. That's strange. Alabama don't do that. They had the men separate than the girls. Okay, then all these guys was like, hey, guess what? Said, I'm really attracted to you, girl. So we got this guy over here who will be watching like that. And we're going to go in your room and we're going to have fun with you. I was like, oh, geez, I'm not really safe. They're talking about and they told me that they didn't have to worry about I didn't have to worry about nothing like that, but evidently I did, right? So then when time much was still there, that lady that I was staying with, she brought some things and they put it in their closet. And there was a very expensive painting, a drawing of me that y'all seen that picture that I'm in the book of me sitting there at the Christmas. And so somebody had drawn. Let me try to show y'all which picture it is I'm talking about. Okay. And a lady, I had paid her before I left Alabama to chalk draw this picture, right? And it got stolen. It got stolen. People wanted to buy it, and it just ended up going missing. Kind of crazy how my pictures, even that, went missing, right? So then when I got out of the hospital, they had a different place for me where I could stay. Well, the room had different rooms, like a little apartment things, which was going to be temporary until like housing opened up. And a lady that used to be in the room before me was a prostitute. So somebody kept throwing rocks, hitting the window, trying to say, open up the door, come down, come on, we want to buy, we want to buy you, we want to buy you. And I said, now I'm in a place where people are bothering me again to say I want to buy you sexually. I'm like, really? Seriously? Where I'm at right now? So a lot of this you could go back and you could laugh at how things were different. And a guy he was a neighbor, and he actually came over there and kept chasing the people away from the windows and all this. And he says, whatever you do, don't go even try to act like you're going anywhere or anything, because it seems like they're keeping a watch on this because of that other lady who was a prostitute that lived here. I thought, oh, geez, So it's a whole lot of different experiences. And I ended up leaving New York. I left some of my prized possessions, like I had a whole box set of Time Life CDs of Anne Murray, the records, CDs. And I had a whole slew of Beanie Babies and such as that. But when I left to come back for the divorce, I had called him and said, "Well, can I sleep um, temporarily for the court case? Can I sleep here?" He said, "No." So after the long trip from upstate New York, and then we stopped at one place, and they had to lock it down because there was a runaway teen. And I told them, I said, "Y'all are making a big mistake locking us in there." They said, "Why?" I said, "Because I just seen her run out that door right after, and then y'all went and locked it. She's done gone. Y'all are in here looking for her, and she already went out that door." You know? So then we go further down to, I think it was Cleveland, Ohio. So all of a sudden, the bus driver that's supposed to took me all the way back to Alabama decided he was going to go back and take different ones to New York and leave us without a bus, leave us without a ride home. So we wait over an hour because they said just wait on the next bus to arrive. So I was waiting on the bus to arrive, and all of a sudden the bus driver goes, "Y'all don't have a ticket for this bus, so y'all can't get on it." Oh man, I was the leader of the pack. I was leading everybody. I was like, "Y'all said, and y'all got rid of our bus. I gotta get home. I gotta get to Alabama. I gotta see my boys. Don't you dare hold me back any further from my boys. You better." And all of a sudden, when he saw that and saw me fussing, then the other people start to fuss. He said, "Let them on that bus. Let them on that bus." So my ex-husband ended up leaving my car at a place which was a drop-off uh, place for the bus station, even though it really wasn't a bus station. So then I ended up having to drive more and going to a couple miles away to an abused woman's shelter temporarily. But what I first did, I knew that I would have to go to the hospital. So I went to the hospital and said, "Yeah, you go over there." And so then that's how I ended up back in Alabama. Then I ended up with a divorce, and um, the judge was the same kind of religion my ex husband was, and so was the attorney. And so when we had a case, the judge said, "No, we cannot hear any of her medical evidence, and we ain't gonna have any of her police reports. No, we're gonna say it's inadmissible as evidence of abuse." I'm like, "What the fudge?" My two proofs about his abusing me and the damage that he done to me, but the judge said it's inadmissible as evidence of abuse. So guess what? He got the house, got the kids. I lost it all. He had to pay me something like so much, maybe 5,000. So I was able, when I got an apartment, to get me some furniture and some goods like that. I was able to turn on the water, put a little bit of money away, but it don't go very far when you have to buy couches and every furniture you need: beds, dressers, mirrors, all the amenities of housekeeping, towels, and everything. It don't go very far. So anyway, as time progressed, as like I said, and I would still go back to Alabama. I mean, go back. My son was supposed to see me, and my husband, I told my son that I essayed him and said this certain thing. And I said, "Hold on." I called back up there and I said, "Hold on a minute. You got this backwards. I said, because you want to open up a can of worms and you want me to come clean with everybody and everybody know what your family had done? I said, that was your mother that when I went to go get our oldest son from your mother, she did not want me taking him. And I went ahead and put a pamper on him just for the little bit to go to my friend's house. So every time my son, he jumped up, he said, screw up my butt, screw up my butt. I said, do what? It hurts, Mom. Screw up my butt, screw up my butt. So I had to pull his diaper off, and I found a silver screw sticking to my son's rectum that either she had done or my ex-husband's brother had done. Do y'all know how that hurt me to not be able to keep have my sons around me and knowing that my sons were in that atmosphere and nobody doing a dang thing? I wanted boys because guess what? I was naive. I really thought at the time that boys could not be abused, that boys could not be SA'd. I found out differently. Unfortunately, I found out differently. So, without further ado, I think this is at a stopping point, and we'll go on next to when we go on in history more, and when I started uncovering more on the sex trafficking. I want to thank you all, and if everything still works out good for tomorrow night, I'm supposed to be interviewing Charles Rogers. He's going to talk about the CPS failures. He wants to talk about um, that barn. He wants to talk about Beth Ramsey, Matt Darrington, Paula, John Bonet, the two boys that was murdered who they rescued out of that barn. Wants to talk about how Nancy Schaefer and Richard Jewell. So hope and pray that it works out where we'll be able to do it live with Charles Rogers tomorrow night at 7. I'm not tomorrow night, but Sunday night, excuse me. Sunday night is when he's talking about doing it at 7 or 8 o'clock at night. That's Eastern time, okay? Well, thank y'all so much, and may God bless each and every one of y'all. Y'all have an amazing holiday. Celebrate the joy of the holiday. Spend time with your loved ones. Please treat people like they matter. God bless.